Mr. Stockenberg.
Present.
Ms. Barber. Present. Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. James.
Present.
Ms. McBride.
Present.
Mr. Marcotte. Ms. Schmidt.
Present.
Mr. Scholl.
Present.
Mr. Tholen. Mr. Tripp.
Present.
Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Witten.
Present.
Mr. Bossert.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present. We have a quorum. I have nothing turned in for public comment. Is there anyone who has a public comment this morning? If not, we'll go on to the approval of minutes for July 9th, August 13th, August 27th, October 27th, November 25th, and February 27th. Have anybody read all those?
I make a motion to combine them all.
Okay, we can do that.
I have a question about the July one.
Oh, okay. That's not on there.
February.
I'll second February 25th.
Is that right? Somebody did read it.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that okay with your motion, Leo?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion? That was you? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Zoning. Next.
What you see to your left is a updated copy of the county zoning map, statutorily every year by May, I think it's May 15th, correct, Del? The Illinois statutes require us to adopt an official zoning map. Del has taken the actions that we've taken over the course of the last 12 months. He's reflected those on this map, and we are asking for the adoption in this to go to the county board at the next meeting to serve as our official zoning map.
Is there a motion to do so?
Second.
Mr. Scholl, second by Mr. Washington. Any questions? Mr. James, what number is that back there? 15?
Number 15, you're on target.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, is there any significant additions on this thing, other than above what we came in? I mean, there's been no...
Well, not just what's come in, what actions we've taken, but otherwise, no.
Otherwise, nothing.
It's a reflection of the variances, and I don't think do we have any zoning rezoning?
Just we had the wind farm special use, which is the blue area down at the bottom. It's kind of shaded in. We had 14 zoning cases, and most of those were setback and lot variances.
Thank you.
A few minor rural estates.
Thank you.
Mr. Scholl, what number? 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, has there been anything done to facilitate bringing those who are not in compliance with the zoning regulations into compliance? Is there an ongoing check of areas that are
Well,
not?
Bob, I think there's two questions that you're raising in that, and what you were saying. And the first one is, this whole idea of having non-conforming uses in in the county, where either the land or the zoning is not applicable, is not compliant. We are constantly discussing how we administer those type of things. In fact, we just had a court case just come out in our favor with regard to a junkyard that was in a residential district and its continued use and what it could do and what it couldn't do. That was a very good case. Ken Nelson took it through the state's attorney's office, did an excellent job, and we prevailed in the the appellate court. So that was but that's going to be a constant battle. It's going to be a constant challenge, I should say, for us to try to meet the needs of people in the community where maybe the zoning and the use of the property are not compatible. And our ordinances are changing. We've changed them on a number of occasions to try to fit what we see or perceive as what the county board wants us to do with these things. Primarily, and what we see commonly is, let's say, a home in the ag districts on lots that are less than 20 acres. So we've been trying to deal with that so that they can continue to use them in that fashion without having a lot of regulatory provisions to them. There was a time when our zoning ordinance would say that if you had a residence in a district where it's not allowed, you couldn't expand, or you couldn't do some significant structural type of improvements, and we've modified that over the years. And that's kind of something that is always evolving, and we try to meet, we're trying to meet those needs. The second thing I think in your comment has to do with, I think, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but the amount of zoning we have for various districts out there. In our comprehensive plan, it was made very clear that we're over zoned. We have an oversupply of zoning districts for our property zone residential, commercial, industrial, and that we needed to take a kind of an introspective look at that and see what is really needed based upon our growth projections. I think, if my memory serves me correct, we have about 35,000 acres in the county zoned residential, and based upon our population projections, we probably only need about 2,300. So there's a big discrepancy in that, and we're kind of coming to grips with that in terms of how we want to proceed with that issue. So I hope that answers part of your question, and I think that was kind of where you were heading with that.
Could I follow up?
Yes.
I'm just out of curiosity, are tax assessors made aware of do they have a copy of this map, or is one sent to them so they can give the property owners a heads up that, hey, what you're planning here or what you propose here is not compliant with the zoning?
No, and I would almost advise that they don't get a copy. A lot of our questions, a lot of our complaints that we will receive from property owners is, will zoning increase the value of my property? Well, it shouldn't. It's, the assessment is based on use. So you might have an industrial parcel of land that's 80 acres, but if it's row crop, it should be assessed as farm. So, the zoning and assessment are mutually exclusive.
Thank you.
Mike, would it be safe to say that most of the people that are out of compliance, we don't really know about? And then once they come in for a permit, then you find
Some, yeah.
a lot of the ag district stuff is that way. And if they want to build something, they come in for a permit, then they're stumped. Yeah. If you could follow up, okay, building?
We were asked by you need to hold on.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? Pass that on to the board. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Building? Junkyards.
Basically, I'm a member of the committee to put junkyards on the agenda, so I will refer to Leo concerning this issue.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you.
You want to start one, Leo?
I will say what I don't know if we can make a motion on this or not until I get done talking. What I had to say is, I had an executive meeting, excuse me while I read this. I asked Bonnie Strasma who inspects the junkyard, and she says she did not inspect the junkyards. And Mr. Washington stated that planning and zoning is the responsibility for policing those areas. He had been working with planning and zoning for several years with Acme junkyard cleanup and so forth. In the meantime, after the meeting, I made a few phone calls and I found out that the junkyard has their own little island. They can burn, they can do anything they want to. So I rest my case. I have nothing to say about junkyards.
Okay. We'll move on to planning.
Okay, can we follow up?
Yeah.
I don't mean prolong things here, but is that valid? Is that true that if I have a junkyard, I can go out there and burn tires and the oil residue on the junkyard? Now, does that come under what we've been struggling with here for a period of time, that delegation agreement?
I think it's a local ordinance as well.
Local ordinance.
So am I understanding correctly, if Leo has knowledge of this, or someone has reported this to Leo, then it should be reported to who would be the proper authorities to report it to?
his statement was that this person was exempt or had his own little island and could do what he wanted.
Yeah,
So,
and that's not valid, and it's occurring, so who is this, whoever reported this, who are they supposed to turn to get this rectified?
Right now, I would have to look and see, I mean, Stan has a question.
Dan?
Thank you. It's my understanding that you cannot do the burning of tires or anything of toxic, period. And I know of a situation where a farmer burned a bunch of tires to burn up a pile of wood, big pile of wood, and an airplane was flying over and thought another airplane had crashed and turned it in. And he was recommended for it very strongly. So there's a reason for it, and I don't think they have a free pass at all. You're allowed to burn, my understanding of anything that you work with on the premises, in other words, if you're working with cardboard or something like that, and it's part of your project, you can burn, but you can't burn anything that's toxic. That's, from what I understand, that's the environmental laws. Mike, you can correct me on that if I'm right or wrong.
Stan, there's a new pamphlet out, I would defer to that about burning, so,
I can confirm that, Stan. I burned some brush, and my brother had thrown an old tire in there, and I had to maintain the fire department out of my neck in about 15 minutes. And a $250 fire call.
Yeah.
So you don't burn tires and stuff like that. Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So nobody knows who's supposed to have jurisdiction over the junkyards? I mean, can we get an answer to that question?
sure.
Okay, what is it?
He said he could.
Sitting up here, I can't tell you.
Nobody knows in this room. Wow. I'm shocked. Well, this goes along with the delegation agreement, and we haven't seen the solid waste plan, and, you know, I don't know, somebody's gotta do something about all this, because it's serious. Especially if nobody in this room knows who's supposed to look over junkyards. So I would like to put on the agenda that we have a meeting about that and bring back the solid waste plan and delegation agreement issues, and maybe put a committee together to work on that solid waste plan and do something about these issues. I think they're important.
I think Bill's been working on the solid waste plan, but honestly, because he isn't here, I'm not privy to what he's been doing, but I know that's still in process. So I know that's ongoing. George?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, first of all, what constitutes a junkyard? Is that where somebody has property and they just throw all their junk on it? Would that be considered a junkyard? And is there anything you can do about it?
That's, Leo, I don't know what you were referring to as a junkyard, so
I was referring to Acme Junkyard on 57 and Grinnell Road, and also the one on Hollow Road in 57.
I had, excuse me, there's some property on, what they call it, Cemetery Road, but it's 4,000 Road going towards, it's in Aroma Park, I believe, when I go home going towards my home on 4,000 Road, there's some land there. And they have old buses, old cars, old whatever over there. And I had complained about this once before. This is not in my area, but something needs to be done about it. So who do you see about all this junk that's been thrown over on this particular land? I don't know who it belongs to.
you can come see, go see Don after the meeting. We can start with that, okay? We'll start there.
Any other, George?
It's been a long, long time now. I have been working with the inspector, not Don, but the inspectors before him, to get Acme backed off of the property line and fences put up and the area cleaned up so that there wasn't junk immediately displayed right in the front of the property. That had been in the planning department for all intents and purposes, and I don't know what's transpired lately to change that out of it, but it was the inspector for planning that went out there.
I remember that. It was cleaned up, it seemed like, for a week or two. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it came back.
Yeah, and for a while there, they would have even just stacks of junk cars, smash cars sitting out front. But as I pass there just about every day now, and it's much better, it's much cleaner. It's backed off of the fence line now, but it's still, you know, there's so much you can do with them because of their being grandfathered in.
Any other comments about that before we move on? John? You want to take that microphone back there?
Is it on?
Yes, sir.
In relation to the Acme site specifically, the health department over the years, during when it had the delegation agreement, and now that we don't, receives numerous complaints from time to time when there is smoke coming forth from what appears to be a fire that has been set on that location. In doing numerous investigations out there, it was determined that the municipalities of, at least I know, Bourbonnais and Bradley have locations back on that property that are allowed by the EPA. They are aware of it. And when there is a storm that ravages the county and enormous amounts of tree damage and landscape waste is cleaned up by the cities, since they are no longer allowed to go to landfills, they're taken out to a location, and periodically on a day such as today, when the wind is not so bad and it's good weather, the municipalities then burn that landscape waste. We've not received, that I'm aware of recently, any phone calls or complaints in regards to Acme actually burning tires and other solid waste items, which would be considered illegal. Most businesses, if not all businesses, are not allowed to burn any of their waste at all. Now, citizens are allowed to burn landscape waste, agricultural waste under certain conditions, so long as they don't create nuisance scenarios, smoke blowing across the road, smoke blowing into a neighbor's yard that maybe have medical conditions that will create asthma or something like that. So the nuisance complaints can be referred to the health department. In relation to the junkyards themselves, the health department has nothing to do with the zoning of whether or not that business is allowed to exist. However, again, we have worked with the EPA numerous times when complaints have been made that there's cars and they're leaking antifreeze or oil or gas or something, but these businesses are supposed to be removing those items from the cars. The cars are not just set out on the ground with a full gas tank of gas and oil in the engine and antifreeze. All that has been removed, and then the bulk of the car sits out there for parts. But if complaints are made, they can be investigated and or referred to the EPA in relation to specific permitting in regards to anything that would go beyond a local ordinance violation. And obviously you are correct. Tires cannot be used to help fuel a fire of landscape waste. That is something illegal, and people will see that black smoke and they will call. And in many cases now, the EPA, either through the health department when they had the delegation agreement, or Donna when she had it with P&Z, or whoever would come down now from Des Plaines, they will issue tickets and potential fines.
Thank you. Any more comments about that? Okay, now we'll move on to River Valley Enterprise Zone expansion.
Does everybody have in your packet, do you have a color map of the proposal? Mine's black and white, but I want to make sure that you feel all of it. It looks like it. George, you might want to just take a quick look. But you're familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with it anyway. What you have in front of you is a application to extend the enterprise zone to the Esselte property and the adjoining businesses, Fiber Drum, and there's a third business in this area. This is a neighborhood industrial area. If you recall, Esselte is over on Duane and Kankakee off of Justine. They have Esselte Corporation out of Missouri has left the facility. Many of you are aware we've been able to keep the manufacturing operation here with Unipar and UDS. because this property has been in existence for so long, it never was incorporated into the enterprise zone, surprising enough. Now that it's vacant, we are trying to make it more marketable, and we have received a request from the city to incorporate this into the enterprise zone, and so we're taking it through the approval process. The city of Kankakee, I believe Bourbon A, Aroma Park, all have taken action so far. I believe the Village of Bradley has, but I haven't got confirmation. So all the units of government that are participating members in the intergovernmental agreement have taken action, and this county will be the last one to do that at the April County Board meeting. So if this gets approved through this committee.
Mr. James, is that a motion to approve it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, is there a second to that, Mr. Washington? Any discussion? Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Mike. Excuse me. This is not connected to any place. I was to understand the enterprise zone and the TIF district was connected all the way through a continuous connection. And I feel that this is sitting here and the city can't keep by itself. Why can't we give them the same thing for Hopkins Park?
There's a couple things. Well, first of all, I'll take the question about this being contiguous. The requirement from the state is that continuity can occur by a 3-foot strip of land. That's just what it is. So we've taken from the current enterprise zone, we found the most direct way. We've created a 3-foot legal description that along the roadway, and we've incorporated the SLT and the fiber drum and the other company into that. Okay. Now, the other issue is with regard to what would you? I mean, we can do that. You typically it has to be incorporated with a project of some sort. All the municipalities would have to get involved in that naturally, and we've had discussions about extending it to the Hopkins Park area. Now, like I said, it would have to be for certain, for a specific project, if it's identified, and then we wouldn't have any problem doing that. But at this time, we just haven't identified one to, for that purpose, for the purpose of incorporating the enterprise.
Yeah, I feel like we need more help in Hopkins Park than we do in one little building here in the city of Kankakee.
Well, it's 150,000 square feet. We don't have a lot of those vacant, and we need to make this a marketable piece of property.
What's coming in there, do you know?
There's been some interest, and we're just trying to make sure that interest continues. I can't announce anything right now, but we have seen interest in that facility.
Is it just the one that building will take, or is it the fiber drum and all of them?
It's fiber drum in that.
We're going to put all of them into the enterprise zone.
Thank you.
Mr. Scholl?
Just a point of clarification, if you would, Mike. By doing this, it's hopeful then that this will increase employment within the area if we can draw business into that area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's actually a motivation to create more jobs in Kankakee County.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. James?
Thank you. Question for Mike. There's a railroad right-of-way that accesses this property. Is that what you used for the continuous? No?
No, I think it was Duane Boulevard.
I just wondered, because I noticed some activity on that road, that railroad right-of-way over there where Bussey and Reeks are at.
No, we use Duane Boulevard from the west.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All same sign.
Aye.
Motion carried. Economic Alliance presentation. Thank you.
We have Adrienne Martin. I think most of you know Adrienne. She is an ISU intern with us. She is working on the economic development side of things for the county, in the planning department, through the Economic Alliance. We share with KCC. One of the things that we're doing is that I think is very beneficial and important in the infancy of our organization with regard to economic development and going forward, is to really understand the local economy and the local economic statistics that kind of describe us. I think it's very important for us to understand these trends and be able to explain some of the economic dynamics that are going on in the county. And what we're doing is we're presenting to you some of our efforts in doing that. Obviously, this is an ongoing project. This is accumulation of economic data that we're collecting and we're researching and we're trying to understand, what is impacting us. We're also using this data to come up with information on what type of sectors of industry should we be trying to attract to the community. So we're going to take you through this little presentation. As I said, we're going to continually improve this. We're going to continually put in information into this, but we've made a couple presentations. We've shown this to the Alliance. We've also made a presentation, this presentation to the Regional Planning Commission, but we wanted to make it here as well, and timing just was that this was when we would present the PZA, but on an ongoing basis, we'll come back to you with further information and an enhanced presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and start it off.
Thanks for letting me join you today.
Can you grab a
Oh,
microphone
sorry.
and out in there?
It comes out.
We're going to get you on tape.
This is our presentation on some dynamics and data we've collected from Illinois Department of Employment Security and the U.S. Census Bureau. So the contents of this PowerPoint presentation, why are we doing this research? We are looking at the civilian labor force. We have unemployment comparisons, industrial composition, our top employers, an economic base analysis where right now we're focusing on location quotient, and then emerging opportunities.
And I think this is very important because when we go back into some of our history, there really isn't an institutional base. There isn't the base information in one single source. So I think it's important that we, as an organization, are putting this forward just for future use. And also, what I think it does help us do is to, as we look at these statistics, it allows us to really measure our public policy to ensure that our public policy is meeting some of the goals that we're trying to achieve in the future. So, as I said before, as this is never a finished product. We continually evaluate statistics. As we look at these statistics and we compare it to our public policy, we have to make decisions on what direction we have to go. So I think this is a very important project that we're working on, and I hope you. By the way, if you have any questions, anytime, just ask us on this. So anyway.
And as this is a good way to promote informed economic development policy, it's also interesting in comparing data sets from, you can see differences, and if you collect data from IDES, that data is collected differently than from the U.S. Census Bureau. And so finding these differences is important as we get all of these numbers from all sorts of sources that you want them to match up, but a lot of times data is collected in ways that is not always consistent.
And we've got to somehow, rationalize that and come to some conclusions, I guess. And we kind of use our knowledge of the community to kind of figure out what information we have to reconcile that in some way, and that's a challenge.
So our first topic, why this research? We want to understand the local economy, our industries. We want to identify trends and evaluate our current economic development policy for effectiveness, educate policymakers for informed decisions, and market the community and target compatible industries. So understanding the local economy, evaluating our current economic development policy, formulating a new policy if it needs to be modified, and then using this information to to show and improve the quality of life here. The first chart is the civilian labor force. From 1990 to 2007, you can see that starting in 2003, 2004, we've seen an increase in the civilian labor force. And this is based from the U.S. Census Bureau, which is the resident-based people who live in this county. So this isn't a reflection of the jobs in the county, but rather people. And that is growing.
And then also, if you see there's two different shades of blue here, the dark blue, the higher number is the number of workers that are 16, I think the definition is 16 and older, ready and willing and able to work. And that is going up in the community. And that's probably pretty, that's not a big surprise. Our population is increasing. But one of the things that we're looking at, if you start to peel away some of the layers, is that it appears to me that the percentage increase, the rate of increase in our workforce is outpacing our population increase, which is kind of an interesting dynamic that we're trying to understand a little bit. The light blue is the employment, and that is of those in the labor force that are actually working no matter where they are at. So they could be living in Kankakee County but commuting to Iroquois County or Will County. And you can see that the number of the employment is going up pretty much at the same rate as the number of workers.
Here's a comparison of the national, state, and county unemployment rates. You can see nationally the United States has the lowest. Then Illinois, and then Kankakee County, and part of that is the size of the labor force, that we see a greater impact in unemployment when a smaller job loss is reported, where looking at such large data sets as the United States and even Illinois, they can lower theirs. It's not
It's dramatic, I guess, yeah.
You can see in the 80s how it spikes, but it is reduced. And 2007, December for Kankakee County, it was 10.6 for Kankakee County. And then for 2008, an interesting relationship is that the civilian labor force grew by 500, but then unemployment also rose 2%. So it makes you think that our civilian labor force is growing, and so is the unemployment. So what demographic, who's coming to Kankakee County to live? Maybe they're not working, and they're able to. These could be teenagers who are working part-time and then not working during the school year. So I think that is something that's prompting us to look at demographics to see who's coming and commuting in our county and how that's affecting our economic statistics.
Those figures still only project the people that are on benefits. There's a lot of people that are unemployed that their benefits are done.
We understand that, Bones, and I think that we're trying to get our arms around that whole dynamic. There's people that don't have, and we've heard that, and we're trying to figure out, how does that play in the statistics. The state economist that deals with this, is helping us try to understand how this all comes into play. But I think what the important thing is, at the end of the day, when we start to identify where is the unemployment, what sector or what population is unemployed, we need to attack that. We need to go into that and try to get jobs for that sector. I think that's ultimately what we want to end up doing. But we're trying to do it through this systematic way of kind of understanding, our whole local economy.
Just have a question. You mentioned that the figures are skewed by young people that have a summer job and then they're unemployed when they go back to the fall. So this does skew the unemployment figures to some extent?
I think that's part of it. Other part of it, and we're working with the workforce board closely with that. Another is seasonal workers. Okay, some seasonal workers, that only work part of the year. One of the things that we understand with that is that segment of employment understands that at some point they're going to not have work, so it's not as dramatic as somebody just totally losing their job. So there's some of that going on. You know, and I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of people that are unemployed, but to talk to what Adrian is mentioning, you know, this is definition 16 and older, ready, willing, and able to work. You know, obviously that's a definition that, you know, we've got to deal with. You know, our unemployment rate is a factor of seasonal workers, you know, the 16 and older, and also people that are really out there looking for jobs and looking for quality jobs, and that's something we got to try to deal with.
Yeah, I meant that as an example, saying, you know, that's an important thing for us to consider, that it may be a demographic issue rather than something having to do with jobs, that maybe there's, you know, maybe it could be the speculation that we need to pursue further to reconcile the demographic changes.
And I think early
with the
on when we
economic.
started looking at this, we were saying to ourselves, workforce is going up, number of jobs is increasing, and then how does unemployment increase? I mean, it just seemed like those were kind of diametrically opposed to each other, but we're finding that those are kind of raising the, you know, at the same levels together. So we got to figure out why that dynamic is occurring, so, and explain it.
Number 12.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yes, excuse me. As far as Hopkins Park is concerned, I see you had 33.2% unemployment. A lot of those people out there, they might not be employed in the type of jobs here in Kankakee, but those people, a lot of those people out there do work. And they might not work in, out this way, they work in outside of the area. They have farms, you know, they raise their own food, they're not on aid or anything like that, they're supporting themselves. So how does that factor into this?
Jerry, I mean, you know, this is information we get from the Illinois Department of Employment Security. So, I mean, we're just giving you data that we're collecting. They determine what that percentage is, and that was what they show for the various municipalities in 2007. I don't think the 2008 averages are out right now, or they might be just coming out in terms of for the municipalities. But, you know, that's the best available data that we have. Whether we can explain it yet, you know, we're kind of trudging through the numbers on that.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to add, and I think this is an important thing that has been brought out, the public perception of unemployment figure is that it's an absolute, this is what it is. And I think it's very important, as you're pointing out here, is that the unemployment figure is quite a complex, varying percentage. It's not, you know, just a simple percentage, and we need to keep that in mind.
Well, and I think that what they also is they determine it on one day during the month. It's like a Wednesday, and they determine how many people are working and how many aren't, and how many have this and that and whatever. And it's a snapshot, and it's based upon a certain day, and then they base that day on information that they know that that's the optimum day of the month that people are working, and you know, it's an interesting whole. You know, you get more confused as you go along, believe me. So
Yeah, I think you're right, sir, because also I don't think they really distinguish between part-time and full-time, because some jobs and employment can be 37 hours, which is pretty much full-time, and you may work overtime to bring it over 40, but it's not counted. You know, how is that factored into how they're defining work? And you were saying, Mr. Pride, that, you know, maybe many people work and it's not counted accurately.
Maybe they choose Wednesday because everybody take off on Mondays.
it is a Wednesday.
But here you see the breakdowns of the different areas and municipalities. The MSA 6.5, 4.5 for Bradley, Bourbonnais 5.4, Kankakee 8.8, Momence 6.2, 19 at 3.9, and Hopkins Park 33.2.
Now, when the MSA, the top one is the issue that we're talking about that we get kind of categorized. There's about 9 what they call metropolitan statistical areas in Illinois. Okay, MSA. You know, we are a small one, and if you go back to your 8th grade or freshman year math, you know, when you start to do it, you know, percentages, you start looking at denominator and numerator. Well, if your denominator is very small compared to the other areas that we're being compared against, any change in that numerator is going to have a big influx of how those percentages. We are probably the second smallest MSA in the state of Illinois. I think maybe Decatur, maybe not Decatur, Danville or something like that might be a little smaller than us, and they have high unemployment. But any impact on our numerator is going to have some wild swings in the case to impact our percentage. But that doesn't, I'm not trying to downplay our high unemployment rate. It's a problem, but we're trying to understand also, hey, there's some other factors out there that we're trying to get our arms around.
And for our civilian labor force, this is based on U.S. Census data, so people who live in this county, they may not work in the county. With the occupations and industries they're reporting, 25% in healthcare and social services, retail trade 11%, manufacturing 10%, construction 8%. So it's a pretty diverse composition. And looking at goods producing and service providing, this is an important distinction because you want to have more goods producing rather than service provision. And in comparing Kankakee County with Illinois, Kankakee County has an advantage that in goods producing, natural resources, construction and manufacturing, we have about 21.8%. It's 78.2% service provision, which trade, information, finance, business services. So goods producing is actually things you can export, things you can, it's value creating. Service provision is really non-basic employment and responding to these basic employment opportunities.
Any questions about that? Do you understand that? Steve?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The one thing that, I'm sure this is some definitional issue, but the health care, I'm of the impression that our healthcare facilities have started to become a regional center where we're actually drawing people in to the area. And so I guess that one, I'm a little bit curious about the definition.
That's a good point. I mean, maybe that's how it's categorized. But maybe this would mean that this needs to change in terms of a shift, because I think it's becoming, it's an import for other communities and an export for us because we're bringing in people.
And then the dollars are coming in there from the outside. That's where the value added, and that's what we're trying to achieve on it from an economic development scale. And what's that?
Shit, what?
Oh.
Bruce, grab that next move.
I just got done working with an individual that was looking at taking a job 38 miles south of Kankakee. But once we did the numbers based on transportation and the difference in medical insurance that was going to cost to take this job, it wasn't feasible, even though it was looked at as a very good job. However, if you go 38 miles south of Kankakee, that area utilizes our hospitals. I mean, they come back to this area, but yet we can't afford to travel to that area for employment based on transportation costs, based on what the benefits of what you're offered here versus there. So that just kind of fits into what we're talking about.
Absolutely, and one of the things that we do have on our agenda is try to capture that to the best of our ability in terms of this becoming, a center for healthcare and dollars being spent here, which is value added to our community. We have been discussing this idea of a healthcare corridor, optimizing Provena, St. Mary's, and also Riverside's expansion, and looking at that whole Court Street area for how we can best utilize that. And that process is ongoing right now. Karen?
Thanks, Jim. I just want to add to that, the other day in the restaurant, I had a couple come in from Low, Indiana, and they were here for medical treatment, and they had never been here before and stopped and visited with me for a while, and they were very nice people, but they had looked for a restaurant, found a coffee shop, and came in and hung out for a while before they had to go to their appointment, so, yeah, it brought
that
me business, so.
It's gonna continue, and it's gonna get bigger.
And as we hope to conduct a competitive analysis where this we see as one of the major strengths of Kankakee County, that maybe we can try to build this area up and see where this can go to bring in more jobs and higher wages and improve the quality of life even more. So this is Illinois, which you see how it's 15.2% rather than the 17.8%, 84 in service provision.
So, I think going back to that, what tells us from a perspective of Illinois, we're doing a lot better in terms of those type of good producing businesses that provide value added. And what we need to do is we need to we got to make sure that we stay competitive in that perspective and foster those type of businesses that are in that sector and try to continue to grow. Now, what's very important here, and to understand this is base information, and over the years, as we start collecting that, and if that number starts to get smaller, we need to figure out why, and we need to take action to make sure the policies are in place that we can continue to keep that good producing sector here and growing.
And I should have mentioned that the last two pie graphs are private sector jobs only. That's not including public administration or any type of public service. And I wonder if that has anything to do with healthcare, and if it's partially public, that's why they didn't include it too. Maybe that's one of the reasons.
Well, like Veterans Home and probably Shapiro, some of those jobs are probably not included in that, but the other hospitals and healthcare are probably incorporated.
And for Illinois in 2008, the unemployment rate was 7.6, and it was 8.8 for 8.8 for Kankakee County. Unemployed 5,000, job loss a loss of 73,000 jobs. That's 1.5% loss. Kankakee County's loss is less than that, only about 0.5 lost less than the state average. So that's we don't want to lose jobs, but at least we're not losing jobs at the same rate, at a slower rate. For the private sector in 2007, the quarterly employment reported 36,293. So we have the rest making up public sector jobs. Looking at the top 5 growth industries, this is from IDES. This is jobs in the county. With IDES, they collect their information based on employer reports rather than seeking the residents or the workers. And looking at the employment from what they are reporting, we can see the growth. That chemical manufacturing, we see a growth of 8.6%. So that's encouraging to see something growing at that rate.
Especially the private sector side, because we're going to be seeing a lot of probably the public sector side growing, and that we've seen that probably nationally too. That government is expanding, and so is healthcare and retail. It's refreshing to see that that's not the number one growth sector that we're experiencing here.
Ambulatory healthcare services growing by 5.3%. Food services and drinking places, 4.9% growth. Hospitals, 4.1% growth. And then wholesale non-durable goods, 0.3% growth. These are the top employers, and this data was collected by actually calling the employers and asking them how many employees they have.
And that was just done in the last 90 days. Well, maybe not 90 days, but it wasn't that long ago.
September.
Yeah.
So these numbers could have changed slightly, or maybe they haven't, but these are the most recent from the direct source. You can see that Riverside has the highest concentration, 2,100. And Shapiro Developmental Center, 1,200. Covina St. Mary's, 800. Cigna Healthcare, 778. And then we're starting to see more of the manufacturers. Baker and Taylor, 736. This ends to 250. So spanning from Petting House at 400, Van Runen Farms 370, to Moments Packing at 250.
It doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
If we could look at these two charts together, I noticed the last chart was 2006, 2007. What are there, the more recent statistics, what do they show us?
I think, you know, and I'm just going to give you pulse based on, you know, what I'm seeing happening. That's not too far off. I think we are seeing some growth in the biotech. I guess I would call it biotech, but chemical manufacturing. There's some growth happening right now in that sector that we're seeing. So that might not be too far off. And obviously, the healthcare in the hospitals are seeing a dramatic increase as well. So I don't see that being too far off from what we were seeing in the 2007 numbers that you're referring to in the.
Thank you. Where do you put the schools at in here? I realize that Kankakee School is making a cut right now.
Go ahead. And
But
go
we
to the
have,
next one.
next one.
Yeah.
I don't see schools in there at all. Education.
Well, when we put the project profile together, I think when we looked at the industrial profile, we started to look at private side. We just looked at the school system in its entirety and only look at the certified employment at that time, because we weren't going to go into, you know, the ancillary assistants, you know, janitors and the secretaries, stuff like that. But, you know, it is significant. I think it was over 1,000 that was in the public school system. Let me ask you, here's a trivia question. Where was County of Kankakee?
Well, that's just where I was going to ask.
6.
Where are we? There's 19 up there, so where does,
we're within the one, where would we fit into that?
Got to be in the top 5.
Yeah. Yes. We'd be right now between Baker and Taylor and CSL. Olivet.
This is from what we collected for the industrial profile, and although the university is a private institution, we wanted to look at first manufacturing to see that growth. So that is included in the community profile for this presentation.
We do have all of that, and I think they were in the, do you remember off the top of your head?
I think it was
4-ish, 500?
700, I think it was.
You think it was all of that?
Yeah. 700.
Community college is in there, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't mean to leave anybody out.
There's so much space on this one slide. Yeah, well, Kankakee Community College, also it's important because there's a shift toward middle skill jobs, and KCC is, that's the producer of the new workers for these middle skill jobs that are really increasing, especially right now. And all of that, I mean, is an important asset to the community, and you know, something we can certainly add.
You know, we're always changing, like I said at the beginning, we're changing, we'll put all of that in there, and we'll probably look at some of the other sectors. We'll include maybe certified public school employees and things like that. Maybe that'll give us, taking the input from the committee here, maybe we'll add that in there. Okay.
And I think an important thing too is that as the Economic Alliance, one of the goals is to be a point of contact for businesses. And these are businesses that we would be involved with and to help expansion and attraction in this area where maybe the universities aren't quite as dependent on the help of economic development agencies.
Stan?
Thank you. Do we have the transportation in here? For instance, like we have large trucking firms and things like that?
Well, we got the warehousing, but no, you know, somebody asked me yesterday, you know, where is, there was a company that we didn't put in the project profile, a company that does some trucking.
We get some large trucking.
A.N. Weber, we have that in the profile, and this is just, the cutoff point was 250. I think they were at 100, and that's why they're not on the list. But so, I mean, you're right, there are some, that's a significant employer.
Yeah,
but just the cutoff.
Several transportation hubs, commercial transportation.
Yeah, this was 250 was just an arbitrary cutoff that I chose.
We're going to have to get our arms, you know, little by little, we're collecting data. We might need to do that because that's a good, having that data is good when companies are coming in saying, we want to locate here, how do we get our goods to the next location? And so if we can show them that we have a strong transportation network that services, we're going to have to, we'll be putting that together. I think George has a question.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, George.
Is the number of employees, is that the reason why American Spring Wire was omitted from this? Or was
Yes.
it looked at?
Yeah.
They're below 250. So, and Sun Chemical is below 250. Hosfenstein, there's a lot, IKL, there's a bunch of those.
But they're stable companies and they've been here for a while.
Yes.
So we have the data, and with this data, we hope to go to analysis, to use this to see how we can formulate a very effective economic development policy and to understand the local economy and how this fits into larger trends. And this data can be used to conduct analyses on the local and regional economy that may result in more informed economic development policy. One of the options for analyzing the local economy is an economic base analysis. And there are lots of different types. And this is the beginning of the economic base analysis and identifying strengths to build upon those. And this analysis provides an accurate profile of the local economy. And right now, we're focusing on the location quotient, which shows employment concentration, the exporting capacity, and regional competitiveness of a certain sector or industry. And this, as I mentioned, shows employment concentration. It's a comparison of, you compare one firm or industry with a larger reference economy, and then that will show you the concentration in that context. And the numbers for gauging, it centers around 1, but it's not, it can be way over 1. Some location quotients can be 14. But if it's less than 1, then local production exceeds local demand, and the industry is considered, if it's greater than 1, then it's an export or base industry, one of the vital exporting industries of your area.
Okay, so here's what we do. There's a formula. We put all this data in based upon our sectors that we were telling you about. And I don't know if healthcare is a good example, but chemical manufacturing and plastics and all these different types of industries we have in Kankakee County. We can evaluate and analyze them based upon a formula. And based upon this numerical formula, if it's higher than 1, these are very important industries for Kankakee County, because what it means is that we have a greater concentration, let's say regionally, at the state level, or even nationally. So when we look at an economic development policy and we find these sectors that have a higher what we're calling location quotient, we want to focus our attention on these, okay? Because they're important to our overall economy. Not that all of them are, they are, but based upon this systematic approach, we can really target certain industries.
And the practice of economic development, you want to reduce your imports and you want to increase your exports. That's how you, exports are creating surplus value that other communities import, and therefore you are creating more value than rather importing and losing value.
Dollars again.
Right.
Bringing dollars in.
Yeah, it's bringing dollars in, and that's one of the shifts, I think, toward being local and independent, that you are self-sufficient and you're not having to import and pay more for things that you could produce yourself. So if it equals 1, then local production is just meeting demand without import or export. So it's not a drain and it's not an asset. And then if it's less than 1, these are industries that you don't want to try to attract more of or try to expand. It's not something that is generating a lot of surplus value for your community.
Let's talk about agriculture, which is kind of maybe it's not a good example of industry, but as a importer exporter of food, or of our food, we're an importer. Mm-hmm. I mean, to think about it, we're such a very huge agricultural state, but when you start to look at foods that the food base, we have to import a considerable amount of that. That's kind of a statistic that we've kind of seen, and it's kind of outside this, but it does give a good example of an import-export type of scenario.
Right. The Illinois Farm and Food Task Force reported that Illinois imports over 90% of its food, and that now they have set a goal to locally produce 20% to become more self-sufficient and rather than having to import food, but to generate it or
So that means that Illinois dollars are going outside of Illinois, and what maybe the goal here, is to try to become self-sufficient and bring in more dollars, so.
Is that all foods, or is that a certain category of foods?
All foods.
I think consumables, yeah. We have a lot of good farmland, I believe, for corn and soybeans, and I think it's that although those can be exported for other things, in terms of what people eat in the grocery stores, is largely imported.
We do produce a great deal of vegetables.
Well, and we do have a organization, a local foods group that we're trying to, that's continuing to build some momentum in the community.
Karen?
Thanks, Jim. Would it be that, because we do export a lot of food that is then packaged somewhere else or manufactured into cereal or whatever, so wouldn't it be that we probably should look for companies that would package or manufacture food more? Because I think we are exporting our food out that is then in turn made into a product and
Let's
then
look at our
we get it
location.
back in.
Before we answer that, let's look at the location quotients and see if maybe, the food sector is in.
You might still involve.
Bring your little button, Mike.
You're right, Karen, I think that, in looking at the companies we have and seeing that they do produce a lot that can be exported, creating linkages in the county for these companies to work together is something I think that we are looking into that would be a good thing to encourage. And here are some of the location quotients for some of the industries. We have food.
Well, first of all, let's talk about what we're comparing. At the top, we're comparing Kankakee County to Illinois, okay? And then the right column is Kankakee to the U.S., okay? Because we can create those type of comparisons with this. So go ahead.
Okay. So compared to Illinois, Kankakee has 0.73 location quotient for food manufacturing. So right now we see that it is something that we're importing more than we're exporting, and we're not self-sufficient.
Which is a reflection on probably the state of Illinois entirely, so.
And similar to the U.S., the U.S. is Kankakee compared to the U.S. is generally about the same as the relationship to Illinois. Paper manufacturing 1.23 and 2.2. So that's a pretty strong exporter, something that we want to continue to look into, and Baker and Taylor might be part of that manufacturing exporting ability. Plastics and rubber products manufacturing 1.3 and 1.15. So we have 3 so far that are over 1, so that's certainly a good thing. Fabricated metal product manufacturing 0.42, computer electronic product manufacturing 0.66. So those are ones that we want to focus on as much. And I think healthcare is something that would be good to include in looking at its exporting, its location quotient.
Yeah, we can do that.
Any questions on these figures?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering, as I look at some of these categories, if a factor that looks at what percent of the total employment some of these are, maybe people in terms of spending spend a lot more of their total income on food and only spend a small share of their income on paper manufacturing.
I don't think, it doesn't have anything to do with the distribution of the income in these sectors. This is the employment.
Okay.
And how many, what concentrate. This gives us some ability to develop some public policy on industry clustering and where do we want to go to say, hey, we have other companies in our area. We can look at supply chain type of companies. We can also look at other companies that are complementary to these sectors and say this is a good place to do business. This just helps us get some idea of where we want to focus some of our limited resources and funds and where we want to go. Karen?
What about entertainment and tourism? I mean, in both instances, I mean, just trying to think outside the box, because we're always thinking about manufacturing, and even with I was at the pool place the other day, and they were talking about more people are putting in-ground pools and putting pools in their backyard because they're not going out of the county to spend money on vacations and things like that because they don't have it. We could use that particular situation to provide entertainment for our people and jobs to make money where they don't have to travel as far, maybe with tourism and entertainment, instead of us going out of the county for that. And vice versa, people close by can come into the county.
That's a
for
great
that-
example of
that type
importing and having money spent here rather than outside.
Right, so
We
they
want
might-
to capture that, you know.
Maybe that's a service provision that can produce value in the sense of bringing people here to being an attractive place for people to come from other areas too, and building a sense of community for that.
Just one more example of that, had a couple come in and tell us that they stayed at the bed and breakfast over in the Riverview area. We're like, you stayed at the bed and breakfast in Kankakee and for their anniversary, but they thought it was great. They felt like they were out of the county, and they thought that they, you know, it cost $125 a night, but it was good food. They were treated very well. They went to 164 for dinner and that kind of thing. People don't know they can do that with minimum cost and not travel far, but still have a good experience inside Kankakee. So it's just an example of that.
Good. All right, we're going to wind down here. We just got a few more slides.
We also, as working with KCC, they have the Council for Community Sustainability, and they're looking at how to help the county become more sustainable. The Economic Alliance is leading Green Jobs and Sustainable Economic Development, that committee. And so we're looking into how Kankakee County can tap into the clean energy economy and to stimulate growth and jobs that preserve and enhance the environment or environmental quality. And looking at Chicago, there's a report produced by the U.S. Metro Economy's current and potential green jobs in the U.S. economy, by Global Insight. They have counted jobs from 2006 that they consider to be green jobs, jobs that preserve and or enhance environmental quality, and what they project. Chicago has the most on this with 16,000 now, and in 2038 they project them to have almost 130,000. Then St. Louis, Peoria, Decatur. And we found for the Kankakee-Bradley MSA, they've counted 441, and they project to have, that we will have almost 3,500 in 2038. So by looking at this, how can we optimize and act on this to help job creation in this way, because it will improve quality of life for the area too.
And you know, that's the emerging industry markets. You hear that all the time at the federal level. But I think that what's key to here that we need to, that I think is important is you look at Rockford and Bloomington with populations and workforces that are 2, 3, 4, 5 times larger than ours, and the projections are that we're going to have double what they have almost, which is an interesting projection, I think, and we're going to see where that leads us. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Does the Bloomington normal projection, does that take into consideration the wind farms down there and the expansion of the wind farms? Or is that outside of the metropolitan area?
In looking at the report, they didn't specify. And it wasn't a locally produced report, and so I'm not sure how they, I know their definition of green jobs, but in terms of taking into account the dynamics in the new wind farms, I'm guessing that they included them because that was before this was produced there, but I'm not positive. And looking at the strengths and incentives of Kankakee County, we have the enterprise zone, an awareness of higher energy costs, which actually could be an asset for finding ways to lower or look at alternatives.
Which we're actually
sources.
going to be bringing in 6 now, major employers. We're having a meeting with them. We're going to be talking about some new technologies out there to see if we can capture some of the energy that they produce to put back into electricity. So we're on that front, and we're trying to move in that direction.
And this in turn will make the companies here more competitive and efficient. We also have the Economic Alliance, and the public-private collaboration has been successful in many projects. And then we have a very good community college that provides very good workforce training. And what we recommend is to identify and integrate into new markets. green jobs being one of those, which could be any sector. You can include that, it's pervasive. Lower energy costs, and work on greening the county and looking at infrastructure, creating a sustainable supply chain, looking at good quality jobs, high wages, and then looking at alternative energies.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We're going to take the tape here a minute.
Do you have anything on the recycling part?
We have nothing under recycling. Any old business come forward? Sorry. Hang on one second.
Brighter in here.
You can break the tape again.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, I just have a question or a point under recycling. Wonder, has anyone looked into the feasibility of establishing some type, and again, I don't know where funding would come from, it's just an idea that was presented. A program, let's say for example, a 4-year grant to a local community or a local organization that is trying to recycle. And as their revenue from it, because, increasing gas costs and so forth, but as their revenue from this recycling project increases, then the size of the grant would decrease, the payment that would go to them, but at least it would get their function, thing moving. Once they're on a profit-making basis, using volunteers in the outlying areas, then the grant would be discontinued. But have we looked at anything of that nature?
Not that I can recall, but we can, after the meeting, we can discuss it.
Any old business to come before this board?
Is that under new business yet?
No, that was under recycling. Okay, any new business come before this board? Stan?
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, you mentioned something about the number of acres that we have already zoned, pre-zoned residential. We got an over inventory. Is there a lifespan for this where it sunsets? I mean, if someone gets their farm zoned residential, how long do they have before they got to develop it, or does it retain that? It retains it.
Yes.
Well, I know of other communities and other areas where that doesn't work that way. You've got a period of window frame in which that land is either going to be developed or it's going to revert back.
Sure.
And I think that's something we ought to take a look at, because we've got some
Steve,
major residential areas that we really don't want no more of them coming in.
I understand. A lot of areas that you're probably referring to are in other states where state legislation is, light years ahead of us in terms of creative ways that they've gone to some planning, using planning tools. Unfortunately, the state here has a very outdated approach to zoning, which we're kind of stuck with. We're a creature of the state. The state tells us what we can do. They give us some very basic zoning authorities, which kind of leads us to this idea of we create these zones, these walls of residential and commercial, industrial. But there's nothing. Some of those are done based upon using other techniques in terms of reverting, probably zoning down. I think that's a slippery slope, because it's some taking issues and it's contract zoning. Excuse me. I've always avoided that, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not sure
But
of
I
down
think-
zoning either, but the thing of it is, if it is, let's put it this way, if they're not sure about it, you know, in other words, I'd come in and if I was to get 1,500 acres zoned, and the statistics shows that we're only gonna be using about 40 acres a year, then I've got an overkill coming in, and it should be established, I would think, that yes, the zoning will retain as long as you keep going on this same pace of development. But if you don't do anything in 3 years, I mean, you should have, I know if I open up a subdivision and I don't open up an addition in 3 years, I gotta come back in.
Right, because the plat will go away. This contract zoning that I just don't really want, and I think Jamie might have a comment on that.
I apparently have my kid, sorry. The only comment I would make on that is, Mike's right, our hands are sort of tied by the state rules, and that's why the details that we find in our subdivision ordinance are so important. Yes, things are zoned residential, or they may be zoned in other fashions, although residential is what we seem to have a lot of. Our subdivision ordinance gives us all of the tools we need to ensure that if development occurs, it occurs in the fashion that is most favorable, not just to that area, but to the county as a whole. That's why I think so much time has been spent and will continue to be spent on a regular basis with the subdivision ordinance, because that's where you get your say-so with, are we going to grant variances here? Do we want curbs and gutters, and how big are the houses, and what are we doing about drainage, and the traffic patterns, and all of that before we actually allow them to go forward with the development of the subdivisions. And that's where we sort of get a piece of this that in other states we wouldn't have to worry about, and that's why what the planning department has done with regard to that is so important, and that's why I think they continue to stay on top of it.
But I think, down zoning, or what, you refer to it as, is unpopular, but, we're in the process of determining if that's the best interest for the community, and we'll continue to work with the county board in terms of how do we want to basically do that. Obviously, Stan, when the initial zoning ordinance was in place, they saw the county growing in various directions that we are not seeing those trends occurring, and they zoned it accordingly. We need to evaluate that. A lot of places have been zoned the way they are since 1967, when we first got zoning, and nothing's occurred in those areas. We need to reevaluate that, because it's good planning and it's good public policy to continue to evaluate that. Okay?
Any other comments under new business? Hold it a minute, Karen. We gotta change the tape.
Wow.
Guys, write it out.
I should have told you to stop talking.
Recycle, play over.
Kevin's got it. He's got it. He's got one. Feed right into an MP. Exactly. Pull the stick out, go upstairs.
Yeah.
Karen, go ahead.
Thanks, Jim. I just wanted to remind, you got another one of those? I just wanted to remind Mike, I need information on the racetrack.
Okay, yes, we were talking about that on the way up the elevator. We'll possibly bring it back up. We'll talk to Karen about that and we'll say it's coming.
Anything else under new business? We have no reason for an executive session that's been taken off. So we need a motion to adjourn. Mr. Whitman, all in favor say aye.
Aye.